Welcome to Tulsa Titans, highlighting our local business leaders who are making a difference. Today I'm with Mitch Myers. He is the owner of Thermal Specialties. Mitch, how are you doing?
Good.
Would you get us started? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I was born here locally and lived in Owasso most of my life. Went to high school at Wright Christian Academy and went to Oklahoma State and got a degree in industrial engineering in 1995 and then got an MBA in 99. After that, I went to work at a local company, a manufacturing company, F.W. Murphy, currently owned by Frank Murphy III. And I started off as just an industrial engineer, kind of working my way up, and got fortunate to get the opportunity to get into management at an early age, and responsible for operations for FW Murphy. So we had facilities in Tulsa and in Houston. We had Grants Pass, Oregon. We had one in San Luis Potosí, Mexico. I actually opened a factory in Hangzhou, China, and hired workers there. But I was responsible for manufacturing, supply chain, quality, information technology, basically all the operations of the organization. And through some changes that had occurred in that environment in the late 2000s, Frank was looking at diversification approach, and came to me with some options on where my future was with the organization. He wanted me to consider staying, but he also knew that as a young person, I was in my mid-30s, that maybe it was time for me to take the next step in industry. And so I had to do some soul searching at that point and tried to come to the conclusion of what it is that I actually enjoy doing. I was doing a lot of things, but what do I enjoy doing? Where do I want to work? Am I willing to move? Should I start my own business? What kind of activity should I chase? And I decided that the one thing I knew I enjoyed more than anything was surrounding myself with a group of talented people, setting goals and accomplishing them. And that sounded like a business owner leader to me. And I was in my mid-30s. This was the time to take a risk. And so I started seeking out businesses to buy and landed on Thermal Specialties. And I joined the organization in 2008 with the intent to buy. We were speeding towards that. The owner, privately held company, and I were working towards that. And then the greatest recession since the Great Depression occurred in 2009, and that kind of put us in a zone where he came to me and said, you know what, let's hold off just a little while. Let this get out from under us, because you don't want to own your first business in the middle of this situation. And it was good advice. And so I stayed on and worked with him to continue to prepare the organization for transition. And in 2010, we were coming upon the opportunity to close the transaction. And all out of the blue, my 36-year-old wife suddenly passed away, and that left me with she left this earth and left me with two small kids, 10 and 7. And I went from a situation where I was working 60 hours a week and wasn't home a lot, just chasing my career primarily, to an entire whirlwind of grief and adaptation to being a different type of dad that I probably should have been all along, trying to figure out my whole world. And that took me a period of time to get my feet underneath me. But we decided that we couldn't delay the transaction too long because there would be some dynamics that would be at play, and we just needed to make a decision. And so I was able to acquire Thermal in July 2011. And so we actually yesterday celebrated our 10-year anniversary of my ownership of the company. And since then, we've expanded the company in various areas. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second, but we've also taken some capital out of that company, and I've invested in other businesses. So I own a company called Upside Interiors, which is an interior design company in Tulsa. I own half of a medical insurance provider agency, which is Flex Plan Administrators. I have about 20 single-family residential properties that I own and lease, and then we'll have a property management company associated with that. We, not just a few years ago, opened a home renovation and building company, as well as we do commercial construction as well, called Renovation Construction Services. And then the most recent venture has been a co-op partnership with a decorative concrete company here locally in Tulsa. So we are, I'm trying to diversify the different directions of my business. I'm looking to grow. Thermal is the engine. We design and build industrial furnaces that are used for heat treating steel products and other high temperature applications in industrial manufacturing situations. Some customers who heat treat steel don't want to buy their own furnace and operate it. And so we have a location in Sapulpa, one in Oklahoma City, and one in Fort Worth, where we take customers' parts, heat treat them, cook them like cookies, I sometimes say, and then send them back to them. And then we also have an insulation supply business where we supply both raw material as well as fabricated insulation products in the industry. These are, again, 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit down to 0 degree insulation factor. So anyway, various industries, various businesses, and I live here. I live at 31st and Peoria. I've been fortunate enough to be remarried. I have 2 biological kids of my own, 2 bonus kids that I've brought in through that marriage, and we're on the verge. The ages are 24 to 17, so I can see the finish line of maybe having some time to myself finally. But it's been a good journey.
That's awesome, Mitch. Yeah, you have a lot going on. If you don't mind, I want to go back for a second. I know that a lot of the younger professionals that listen to this, and I see a lot of them, they get caught up in the chasing the corporate ladder strategy.
Yes.
And you mentioned putting in a 60 hours, and I imagine it was probably a focused 60 hours. And then that reset from tragedy allowed you to see things probably a little bit clearer on what needed your attention. Can you kind of speak to that for anybody that's young and kind of climbing that corporate ladder on what you might have done different?
Yeah, I think it's a complex chase in life because obviously when you're young, you're trying to establish your identity. You put in many cases, if you've been educated and you want to try to further your education in the corporate world, you're looking for the opportunity to have more a voice at the table. You want to earn more income, and you feel like you're contributing to your family by earning more income. And so you're chasing that ladder in that regard. But then there's this aspect of that your kids are only little once, and that you can only see them do certain things, play baseball games, go to basketball games, chase them around one time. And life pulls you in multiple directions for sure. And I think, trying to maintain some balance and not only with your kids, but I would argue that with your spouse, I think it's something that if you don't pay close attention to, you end up in a habit of chasing your career, in my world, it was chasing my career and chasing being a 0 handicap golfer. and there wasn't a whole lot of time for anything else because both of those things consumed a lot of my time. And if I had to do it over again, I would play less golf. I'd work a few hours less and make sure I had some focus time on my spouse and a little more focus time on my kids, and try to find a little bit more balance. But a lot of times we don't learn things the easy way. We have to learn them the hard way. And a reset for me with the tragedy that I had helped me kind of level set myself. So I would just say to younger people, just make sure it starts at home with your spouse, your wife, your husband, to make sure that connection is completely solid. Your kids depend on it. Your job depends on it. And your happiness, your own happiness depends on it. And so that's number one, that you've got to, if you're going to invest time in a person or in an activity on this earth, that's where you spend it. And then your kids need to come very close after that. And then your career definitely it comes right along with that. And I think that, you can justify putting in a lot of hard work to support your family and your kids and your wife, but you've got to find that balance. So that's the best words I can give.
When you mentioned time, I want to dive in, because everybody's been through a little bit of a shakeup this last year, 2020.
Yeah.
So they see things differently. What do you maybe consume more of this year than you did last year? And what are some of the things that you've consumed less of since we've kind of hit that last season?
Yeah. So that is an interesting question. So for a guy who has gone through what I've gone through, kind of a reawakening of sorts, just about 10 years ago, my perspective is a little bit changed. So I know that life is short, and the opportunities to enjoy the fruits of the people and that this earth has to offer are fleeting. And so I continue to try to lean into things that are more that are harder to capture. And so, and one of those would be travel. So last year I didn't travel at all for obvious reasons. But one of the things that I started doing more and more of is I had hardly vacationed or traveled at all other than for business, before my first wife passed. And I have really decided that, spending time seeing the world, standing with my feet in the ocean and, contemplating why I'm here and what I value is an important aspect of my life. Obviously continuing to invest in my family. I got a daughter getting ready to go off to Washington, D.C. to college. And then at 1 year after that, she goes to Japan for 2 years. So, there's only so many days left in these kids being at home with me. So that's another thing I'm leaning into. And then on the business front, I think it's time for me to really chase some business growth. When I bought that company, I took on a lot of debt. At the 10-year mark was a magic mark for us to kind of retire quite a bit of that debt. And so last year, we were starting to get in a position where we could invest. And then, of course, COVID hit. It wasn't wasn't a time to really invest. It was time to kind of hunker down and make sure we were in a good athletic position. So this year I'm emerging, and I'm really chasing opportunities both inside of my businesses and outside of my businesses to grow opportunities in business and my various investments. So that's what I'm leaning into. What I'm trying to lean away from is, over the time of COVID, I spent a little more time indulging myself in things like food I shouldn't have been eating, and maybe a little too much beer drinking at dinner. And so that's one thing I'm trying to lean away from a little bit. Another area I'm trying to lean away from is focusing on myself and trying to remove the ego aspect of me. Trying to make sure that I step back and understand when I'm dealing with individuals that there's various pain and challenges that everybody goes through, and it's not an assertion on my worthiness or whether they value me. And then the last thing I'm kind of trying to remove some time away from is I spent a lot of time in my years trying to maintain as many possible friendships as I could possibly come up with. And I'm learning that those more distant friendships do pull my time away from the things that are probably the most valuable and the highest priority for my life. And so I've tried to be okay with not necessarily maintaining all those friendships because it's an exhausting chase. So those are the things with my time.
No, that's a great list. Well, yeah, it is hard to keep up with everybody all the time.
Yeah.
But for you, you're going through a lot of self-reflection. It looks like you've identified, a lot of entrepreneurs have that, right? They have that determination, and it can lead to some selfishness or pride if we don't watch out. How have you identified the blind spots, and what does it look like for you to take time, like you said, to kind of just mentally understand what people are going through and not take it personal in this season of life?
Yeah. It's so easy as you work your way up the food chain in management or ownership of a business to gain some feelings of arrogance or competence that maybe you understand or see things better than others. But what I try to remember and learn is I just see things different, not better. In fact, in many cases, I have admiration for people who can see things through a completely different lens than I am seeing it. That value that they have, I would, if I could write a check for it, I would. That they can see things in a different light of more what actually does give true value and true meaning in this life. The ability to connect with people and not necessarily always be right or always win, but have an emotional intimacy and empathy for people. And not get caught up in the intellectual academics of a relationship. I just think I'm just constantly trying to ground myself in that I woke up the same way these people woke up. Tomorrow or today, I may find out that I have cancer or that or my business is going under, or all kinds of things can happen to me, and I can't predict those things. And so I try to just remember that the most important things that I'm going to enjoy and look back on in my life as I age closer to my father's age is not the fact that I was able to prove myself right or had all the answers, but more about that I extended care and love to people, and that I received that care and love in return. And that's the key. That's the key that I keep trying to remind myself of. That's what's really important, regardless of how much money or power or knowledge I have when all this starts to come to pass. In fact, at the age of 50, I'm learning that some of the things I learned, I'm forgetting because I'm just getting older. And so that's just going to continue, and my knowledge is going to become that much less valuable. And so it's more important that I have those intimate relationships.
I have a business partner, and we had one of the coolest moments this year. So I'm 36, he's 53. And when we started business together in another company, we've worked together for 14 years. You couldn't get anything past him. He just anything. Then as he got older, I was, in my 20s, and, you just kind of look at somebody like, I got one over on you.
Yeah.
This year, we were running a bunch of directions like you do, but I've always been able to remember all the details. I couldn't even remember having a conversation, like flat out. Couldn't recall it, couldn't do it. And that face making, he stood on the other side of the room just smiling and looked at me and said, "It gets worse."
Yeah.
It gets worse. And that's one of the things is real. That's humble too, right? Really into the people around you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think what you gave is excellent advice. So you're diversifying, and you've got, for young entrepreneurs, it's a dream, and they see people do it and they want it now. And I think we've got to get over that. Everything good takes time, and it takes failure and the right people around you. But when you're running and investing in multiple businesses in completely different verticals, right? What's something you do every day that makes you successful? What's a good habit in your life?
Well, probably the most effective habit for me is just my organizational skills. I sit down, it's pretty rudimentary, but I sit down every day with a task list of items that is prioritized on what is the most important things I should be working on today. And those, it's not just work, it's personal as well. Everything in a one task list. And so I'm whether it's, for example, my wedding anniversary is coming up in 2 weeks. It's on my list. I can't forget to make sure that I take care of my wife on that day. But I've also got things like, an acquisition discussion with a company that we're trying to acquire. And so I think it's just, every day sitting down, resetting, what are the priorities? What are the things I need to accomplish? Going back to that over and over and over again to make sure that I've got an organized approach on how I set my path going forward. And it, quite frankly, based on the conversation we just had, as you get older, you can't keep that stuff in your head as long as you used to. I used to be able to keep it all in my head and not have to write it down. I'm much more effective if I write it all down now, for sure, whether it's on a phone or a computer or on a piece of paper. So.
Yeah, I found writing it down too. Just like you said, it's some of the things that allows you to operate at a high level are pretty boring.
Yeah.
But without writing it down, I was always more emotional in my decision making. I can go back to that list and go, no, this came up, but this is what's most important today.
Yep.
So in the seasons, and I like to ask this question, especially of you, because a lot of people just don't know how to handle their emotions right now.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of businesses didn't have a choice in the way that they're having to recover from last year. And you've walked through that on a personal and business level at the same time. What got you out of bed yesterday? What's your why to keep going and keep moving the needle forward?
It takes time, I think, in life. Some are more fortunate than others that it comes sooner rather than later. The key is to continue to search for it until you find it, and that is your why. What is it that you love doing? What is it that you're effective at? What is it that can make the world a better place? I think that we're all chasing that, our purpose. And early in life, sometimes many of us don't know what that is, but we just keep charging ahead and hoping someday we run into it. And it took me a while. It took me well into my 40s before I finally kind of connected with what I believe my purpose is, and why I get up and what I try to do every single day. And that is that I just like to help people. So forget everything else in this world of the things that I spend my time doing. And there's things I enjoy doing. Don't get me wrong. I like to play golf, and I like to go on vacation, and I like to do all kinds of activities. But what I get the most satisfaction out of is building connected relationships, and then trying to figure out a way what I have, whether it's my knowledge or my resources or my time or my work, what can I give to help my employees or my customers or my suppliers or my alma mater, or my friends or my wife or my kids. There's nothing for me that's more important than the time that I give away, what I give away, and helping someone, and then feeling that connected. I can tell you care about me and you value me, and that's really good. That really makes me feel good every day. So every day I get up, a lot of my task list has to do with those things. Trying to move the ball forward on helping other people. I think the only challenge I'll say with that I've struggled with is that I enjoy it so much that it's almost addictive for me. And I have to be careful because my wife at times will be like, hey, you like to help all these people. Don't forget about me. I need your time. And so, like anything, too much of anything can be bad. And so I just have to be careful with how far I extend myself. But yeah, I think my why is that I want to connect with people and help them as best I can with whatever resources I have to give.
That's wonderful. I have a kind of a similar journey. I run a men's ministry. Caught up, and you get the phone calls, and what I want to tee in on, because we're doers, for any of the guys listening, and I it's hard to find a guy that doesn't like to accomplish things.
Right.
And helping people is an emotional tie, and it's accomplishing things, and everybody around you is going to pat you on the back for it too. It's a triple.
Yeah.
Right.
You got to be careful because it pads that ego. Yeah. But yes.
It does. And then my wife said the same thing to me, Mitch, like, hey, I'm here. I'm not your roommate. Right.
Yeah. Right.
And so what I had to do, and I do it with a lot of guys, is I write the schedule. I only had to do it once to see it. I throw my calendar up, and I like how you put personal and professional there, because it's life. Don't put things in containers. And I put everything on there, and I put what's most important in a list. And I looked at my calendar, and 3, 4, and 5 on that list got the most time. Yeah. So what I've done is my wife and I had a fight about this too. It was funny. I started blocking time off that's just hers. And once she understood the kind of the why behind it, she's
like, don't put me on your calendar. I'm your wife. But you're like, hey, no, you don't understand. This is how I lean in on this thing, right?
Yeah, this is my love language. Like, you don't understand. This is a not movable thing, right?
Right.
But that really helped me. And time again, I talk to a lot of young professionals, and that's their struggle, is this work-life balance. And my go-to for them has always been that task list ahead of time. It's like, hey, where have you blocked that time off for what's most important, and don't let you run over it.
Planning. Yeah. So which goes back to what I feel. You asked me what is the one thing I do that helps me the most, and it's planning, organization and planning those types of things that you're talking about. Exactly. Personal and professional.
So out of all the relationships, have you had one or two that really stick out? Just some people that you admire or have really poured into you to get you where you're at?
Well, so many people have poured into me that I'm completely blessed. It's hard to say that the two individuals haven't had more of an impact in my life of where I've ended up. Obviously, 3 individuals of where I've ended up than anyone else, but I would be remiss to ignore. There's many others that have played dramatic roles in my direction, but I would say first and foremost is my father. He was always a beacon of what was possible. He had kids when he was 16 years old. Went to school at night, got an engineering degree while he worked full time. And grew up on a farm, rode a horse to school, didn't have any electricity or air conditioning, the whole 9 yards, and ended up in the number 2 spot at a Fortune 500 company by the time he retired. It was to this day, I say I'll never be able to live up to the accomplishments that man was able to accomplish. And not only that, he invested in me as a kid. I felt like, I was really connected to him, and he invested in my athletics and my education. And so he's number one. Number two would be Frank Murphy III, who took me in as a young student. I was just a student out of college, went to work at his company, and he gave me opportunities to learn management, gave me international exposure, operations exposure. A really talented guy who I learned a lot from over the years working for him. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention him. And then the third is the gentleman that I bought Thermal from, that I worked side by side with for 3 or 4 years, getting the company bought. Robert Caffey. He was cut from a different thread than I was. He'd grown up in more of a blue collar environment, and a self-made guy, and taught me the ins and outs of being an entrepreneur and running your own business, and the types of things that are different than being a executive at a corporation. And so I think those three individuals definitely had the most impact in where I've ended up. But I could list dozens of people that have made significant, that everything from people who held my hand when my wife passed and my kids, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my kids, to people who educated me in college, to people that have invested in me since I've been a business owner, to help me navigate my own path in entrepreneurship. So anyway, that's my list.
It's a great list.
Yeah.
I like that everybody sees, along the journey, if you'll let people in, if you've got if you have some decisiveness of who you let in, it can really, really bless you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I listened to your podcast on the owner of Oklahoma Joe's the other day. Joe Davidson, is that his name?
Yeah, Joe Davidson.
Yeah, so I listened to that whole Tulsa Titans podcast where he talked about that the CEO of Ditch Witch was really instrumental in his mentoring him, and then just a week after listening to that podcast, I was down at 61st and Yale and walked in Oklahoma Joe's to order some food, and there he stood, and we chatted about exactly that, and the fact that we all need at various times in our life some mentoring, and I'm getting to the place where I'm becoming more in a position to do mentoring than to be mentored. But it's all about, we all need some help at times to know which direction to go, and then we can hopefully use that to pass that on and pay it forward to the younger generation. So
when your organizations in this season of life, how are you distilling the values that you have that made you successful in the actions throughout your organization? What's that look like?
I try to push my value system through the organization by talking about it. So we have regular all-employee meetings where we meet every couple of months. During COVID, it was online, which was less than personal, and I didn't particularly enjoy that. But we're back to doing those in person. And so I do 3 or 4 of those a year, and then my managers do 3 or 4 of those a year, where we bring all the employees into a room, and we show them the financials of the company, and we talk about what's going on in the organization, and we talk about what we're trying to accomplish. And so one of the things that I wrote, you asked me that question in advance, and I wrote down, well, the first thing is that I try to practice the golden rule, do unto others as you would want them to do to you. I try to practice that with my employees. I try to speak that language when we talk to people inside of our organizations. The transparency is what I talked about a little bit there, where we're bringing them in, we're just, opening the kimono. We let them, I tell them, I'll tell you how much money I make. I'll tell you how much money the company makes. What our cash flow situation. There are no questions that are off the table. I try to promote intimacy by when I sit down and have a conversation with people in our organization. I try to make sure they understand that they have my undivided attention, and I actually care, and I listen, and that I encourage them to do the same with either their employees or their peers. The ongoing communication aspect, I think that, one of the sayings I heard back in my early 30s was, there are two questions that every person in an organization wants to know: how am I doing, and where are we going? And so I'm constantly trying to make sure that they know where we're going, and I want to make sure that they have a constant feedback mechanism, that they understand how they're doing. So communication. And then finally, there's probably no substitute for surrounding yourself with people who share your core value system or have similar value systems. So it's one thing to try to hire people that might have it and might not have it, and then teach them yours and hope they adapt it. But quite frankly, most people, a lot of that's already there within their self culture. And so you need to make sure that you spend some time during the hiring process to make sure you're connecting with people that share those values. Now, they can have different ideas, viewpoints, experiences. That's all wonderful, because you need that at the table. But some of the core things like values and work ethic, I think you want some similarities within your organization on that. So.
No, that's great advice. We actually do our interviews now for that exact reason. And I'm sure early in your career, you found out the hard way when you wanted somebody to work for certain things, but they didn't have those specific core beliefs or drivers, that it just wasn't a fit.
Right.
Lay it for that. One final question around books. So personal or career wise, has there been some books that have really spoken to you and helped build you up over the years?
There are. So on the professional basis, I would recommend a book called Top Grading. So this book focuses on making sure that you have the most talented people working for you, and helping you understand how you can navigate that process to make sure that you've got the most talented people working for you. There's probably no more significant factor other than luck in a business and its success, but the people that work there and how talented they are in their position. And so that book, Top Grading, is something I recommend for a business read. It's a good business read that will help people understand how valuable it is, and why, instead of interviewing people for 10 minutes, when I hire key jobs in our organization, I spend 3 to 4 hours with a candidate, trying to learn everything I can about them instead of what I can get in a McNugget interview. Second, on a personal side and growth side, there's a book by Eckhart Tolle called A New Earth. And it is, if you read the book, it expands your thinking. It's written at a very high level, so be careful as you read it. You're going to be like, what did I just read? I got to read that again. What did he just say? I don't understand what exactly what he's saying right there. Not to mention it dips into lots of different, it basically says some things around that a lot of religions share a lot of the same values, a lot of the same core beliefs in caring for one another and respecting our planet and various things. And But the focus of the book is trying to disconnect from your own ego, your own sense of self, and realizing that you're not as important as maybe you make yourself out to be. And I have now read that book 3 times. I'm actually in the middle of my 3rd reading of it. And it's one of those things that every time, I set it down and I go a year and a half without reading it, and then I pick it back up and I read it again. And it kind of regrounds me in trying to make sure that I've got my head on straight, and that that I'm not quite as great as I sometimes get convinced that I am.
Well, Mitch, if somebody's listening to this and they have a question or want to get a hold of you, what's your preferred method of communication?
Yeah, so easy way to get me is to jump on our website, thermalspecialties.com, and click on our staff page, and my contact information, my email address and phone number are there. But yeah, they can email me at mmyers@thermalspecialties.com, or they can text me or call me at 918-698-2751. I'm easygoing. As long as you don't take too much time away from my wife, I should be good.
There you go. You learned that one, right?
Well, I'm trying to learn. She's not convinced I've learned, but I'm trying to learn.
Hey, as long as we're getting there, right?
Yeah. We're on the right path.
We know where we came from.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, everybody, thank you. I'm Kellen Cowan with New Wave Solutions. Mitch, genuinely, thank you for giving your time today.
Yeah, absolutely.